Did you guys ever use those like chew necklaces?
She didn't ever take to any chew toy.
Really?
No.
Oh.
That we had one. I take it Elia is.
Oh yeah, I'm wearing that necklace like all the time now, and she's got it in her mouth.
Well, our dogs love them, so.
Yeah.
Hello, and welcome to the Ride a String podcast. I'm Kevin Sluter.
And I'm Matt Moreno.
And we are bringing you a show about orchestra teachers.
For orchestra teachers.
And those aspiring to be orchestra teachers. In this episode, we speak with Geoff Golden about his decision to explore employment opportunities outside of teaching and look back on his time as an educator.
So I grew up in a very musical family. My grandfather conducts orchestras. My mother does choirs. My uncle also does choir-related things. And my sister plays the violin like a professional symphony. So music was always just very much part of my growing up. I started playing the violin at 3. My parents forced me to quit 6 months later because I was way too competitive. They thought it was unhealthy. Then I played violin for 6 months when I was 3 years old, and I was too competitive with my sister, so they're like, no, you're not doing this anymore. I started playing piano when I was 7, and then cello when I was 9, and loved it. Had a very, very charismatic orchestra director. His name was Arkady Fomin. He passed away a couple of years ago. He just made every last one of us feel so incredibly valued, and created this amazing culture in the orchestra where we could be artists and kids and feel amazing about how we played. And I got addicted to that. I loved it. And so had some health issues. I have a wrist injury where I can't bend my wrist fully back and forth on my right wrist. So I wasn't able to pursue cello at the level I had originally intended because I originally wanted to be a soloist. But after that happened, I went to Dallas Baptist University, only knowing that I wanted to do something to help people. That was very, very important to me, that my life be about more than just me. And found my calling in music education. Got my degree there, happened to be vocal choral, because that was the program that they had. Did a year of teaching choir. It was good, but it wasn't my thing. Went into orchestra, ended up loving that, spent 8 years doing it, taught with Matt for a couple of years, which was a lot of fun. And now I'm no longer teaching. I am in the world of business and supply chain.
Given the nature of what you're doing, you may not always be able to tell us great detail about what's going on here, but what are you doing now, essentially, without even necessarily saying a company or anything?
It's fine. I can talk in broad terms. So I do long-range planning for the manufacturing systems at a beverage company. And so just looking at what capacity do we have, what capacity are we planning to have, what do we expect the demand for our products to be, and how can we bring those two things into alignment profitably to deliver a great product. So I was not expecting when I left teaching for my job as a teacher to translate as much as it has to business. But when I went and I got my MBA, I spent 1.5 years doing that. And what I found is that an analytical mindset is really what people need to be successful in business. Just an ability to look at a lot of data, frequently not clean data, like it needs to be recategorized in order to even be able to analyze it, and lay a structure on top of an unstructured problem to be able to figure out what it is that you're supposed to do, then create a plan to execute on that, what you think you're supposed to do, and deliver on it. Well, that's what teaching is. You have a piece of music that you're going to give the kids, and how am I going to spend the next 8 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever it is, 6 weeks, getting them ready on this. Where could this process go wrong? How am I going to plan for that? And then execute on that. It's the exact same thing. So you just have to learn the context.
So you want to tell us a little bit about how you got to this new job of yours, and just what that transition was like and what led you to make that decision?
Yeah, so very broad. So I guess let me start at the beginning of that. So I loved teaching. I loved every moment of being in front of the kids and working with the kids. Some moments were more stressful than others, but at the end of the day, I loved the kids I got to work with and the music we got to make. I wouldn't say it was anything about teaching the kids that caused me to feel like I wanted to transition out of that position. It was more all of the things that surround it. So if you think about just like the process of teaching, there's articles all over the place about what makes teaching difficult. So there's a lot of general stuff. There's there's the hours, there's the pay, there's the stressful situations with parents or with administration. All those things are very common to teaching. I'm not going to add anything there. But all of that's worth it to you if you go into teaching. Like, theoretically, you know about that stuff ahead of time, and you're willing to accept it, and so you go into so that's not the reason, at least for me, why I left. I went into teaching because I wanted to help students. To me, it was a moral imperative that I do the right thing for these kids and that I be the best that I could be. And that's really stressful. When the entire program is on your shoulders and you feel like the success of these students, not just musically but personally, is your responsibility. That can be very, very stressful. And again, that was a part of the factor, but ultimately what I just found was the longer I was in teaching, and the more control I got as a head director, because I transitioned from being an assistant to a head, the more ownership I took of those sorts of situations and feeling like things should go a particular way to help the kids. And I had a difficulty letting go of that at the end of the day. And I just felt like my values of always wanting to put the student first and doing the right thing for them wasn't always something that was going to get enough support. And so I think my inability to detach from that at the end of the day and to have an identity outside of teaching was what ultimately tipped the scales to where I felt like I need to make a change. And so I had a friend that was in business, and I just told him about a lot of the things that I was doing as a teacher. And he goes, "Dude, you would love what I do. You'd be good at it." It's the same thing I was talking about with the analytical mindset. And so I looked at an MBA program. I went to the University of Texas at Dallas. It was a great program for me. And I got into that, and that's when I made the decision to leave, was when I knew that I would be able to go into my MBA. And so yeah, I did that, loved it, and just found that a lot of the same things about teaching that I enjoyed could be transferred to this new job. It could be intellectually stimulating, it could be fun, it could be meaningful. And at the end of the day, I could go home and spend time with my baby girl and not worry.
And I think just to clarify for the listeners, when it comes to you talking about catering to the needs of each student, you're kind of a kid magnet. You want to tell us how many kids you averaged as a head director? How many students?
So we definitely averaged over 300. I had fun, and I think the fact that I had fun meant the kids had fun, and it just was infectious. And so it ended up working out. So yeah, we had over 300 kids. When we went to contests, tended to get, good rankings at contests, the sweepstakes ratings and stuff. The program was healthy. So
just two directors.
Yeah, so yeah, just two directors with, sorry, I forget that not everybody that's listening to this is in Texas. It's just two directors with over 300 kids. So I think the largest class that I ever had to teach on a regular basis was 62 kids. The worst in terms of actual teacher to student ratio that I had to deal with was like 40 beginners by myself. That I would have taken 62 upper classmen over 40 beginners any day of the week just because of those physical concerns. But we made it work. You take whatever you're given and you find a way to be successful and you find a way to laugh through it. And that was my favorite part of the job, was just the pure joy and laughter of every single day with those kids.
You strike me, just based on what I know about you, as being pretty well suited to doing a job where you've got to manage a program with that many kids and look at it almost kind of like data. You're like, okay, I need to have this over here in this column and this, and it probably helped keep you calm with that many kids because you had things kind of organized in a way that made sense to your brain, whereas a lot of people would just, because I feel like sometimes kid magnet can mean a lot of different things. Like, I think kids are attracted to a person that is like true to themselves and is their own unique personality. You find people sometimes that try to be that kid magnet, but it's not their personality to be this kind of wacky person or to be this kind of thing. Like, I feel like they really gravitate towards all different types of teachers, and you strike me as somebody that, like, the kids talking to you, they walk out of the room, and then there's this spreadsheet with everybody organized by, their instrument period and private teacher, and it all is a well-oiled machine. But
so that I enjoyed both aspects of that. I feel like the degree to which I was able to let loose and be silly in front of the kids was facilitated by my have an idea of where things needed to go and how I was going to manage that many kids, and thinking through things like, what is the proper spacing between the chairs? How are we going to properly lay out all these bows? All of the setup sorts of logistics kinds of things that's done before the kids ever walk into the room to create that healthy environment, to minimize the chaos. That's really, really important. And then if you can create that environment for yourself where things are organized and the kids know what to expect, and then they also like being around you, which is the importance of that can't be overstated. Then it just gives you the freedom to have fun. And that's, I felt like my ability to be in front of those kids and be silly was directly related to my non-silliness behind the scenes. So,
did you ever struggle to find the balance between the time it took to keep that behind the scenes management and the need to be that person out with the kids? Like, I know I've struggled with that myself. One of my last few years at Louisville High School, I just found myself going, like, the kids would look in the door and they would go, okay, this is not the time to go hang out with Mr. Sluter, because it was just like, I don't have time, like, I must do these other things so that everything else works. I mean, I've personally found that a tough part of teaching is finding the balance between being there for the kids and being there for the program, I guess you should say.
Yeah, I can't imagine a time in my teaching career when that wasn't a major concern. You try to keep it out of the classroom. You try to not let it affect your teaching. You try to account for everything outside of that, and yet finding that balance to where you can to not have to worry about that in front of the kids and just focus on them and be properly prepared for them. I felt like I could choose between two of the three. I could do a great job teaching. I could do a great job administrating. I could be a great husband. And that kind of goes back into part of the reason why I ultimately transitioned out. Other people don't have programs like that. I had over 300 kids, and there was only the two of us. And there's a lot of teaching situations where what I went through is not the case. But trying to find that balance and finding that frequently the balance for that was going to come at the expense of my being home at a reasonable hour, that wore on me. It's still important though. And if I had the silver bullet for that, man, I'd make so much money. I would not. Anyway.
So one of the things that most directors do as part of their job is trying to educate the families and the students that having music in their life is going to affect their life skills later on down the road. I'm curious, just as a director, like heading a different path, do you feel like there's a skill set you've developed from teaching that has been brought with you into this side of the real world?
So, I mean, yeah, a lot of those sorts of things. I think that, I'm not sure I'm about to answer your question directly. I apologize if I don't. I'm not trying to be evasive. I know that there are difficult parent situations that you end up having to deal with, and figuring out how am I going to phrase this to a parent in such a way where what they hear from me is, I love your kid, I want what's best for your kid, and that's my only goal. Even when you're also saying to them, yes, I'm going to be grading down on them for the fact that they're missing the concert because they're going to a ballet practice. Finding a way to communicate that, carefully picking your words and knowing your audience, and reading them and speaking to them specifically, that's very, very important in what I do now. There's a lot of companies merge. A lot of companies go through periods of major change. And so getting people that were in two different companies to commit to a single plan, or to possibly change the way that they do things based on new data, being able to persuade people while also making them feel valued, that 100% transfers. And I think the heart of being a teacher is useful anywhere, because you're trained to just constantly think about how can I be helping this person. Whereas in business, thankfully not where I work, but often in business it's very much a me sort of a situation, and how can I advance me and how can I look good, sometimes at the expense of the rest of the business. And the ability to think about everybody else and do what's best for them too is really valuable here.
So you decided to leave the classroom. Now that you're on that other side, what expectations do you have? Have those been met? What are maybe some surprises you weren't expecting? Just talking a little bit about, the before and what you imagined and then what it actually is now.
So I remember going out and getting lunch with the head director in my cluster, just because we were interviewing for an assistant. I'm not even sure if it was for my program. I think it might have been for one of the high schools. And we were just sitting down at a restaurant and we were going, oh my gosh, if we think about all the people that get to do this every day because they're in business. There's just things like that you're like, oh yeah, if I was in business, I would always get to do this. Some of it's played out, some of it hadn't. I don't go to lunch outside of the building, mainly because I still like to save money. So I don't think I've left this place for lunch since I got here. And very few other people do. That's also because we enjoy being around each other. So we like to congregate in the cafeteria and just talk about anything, frequently not work. So I think I thought that I would have to be here from 8 to 5, and that I would only work 40 hours a week. And I think that your hours are directly tied to how you approach work. I was the kind of person who approached teaching ambitiously, because I felt like the kids deserved it. I didn't go into business and suddenly go, okay, when is it going to turn 5? How can I get out of here? I work more than 40 hours a week. Nobody's forcing me to. I don't feel a moral imperative to work more than 40 hours a week, so that's nice. But I like to do a good job, and so yeah, I work harder than I expected I would when I left teaching. But it's much more flexible. I was telling Matt on our way in here, I had a doctor's appointment on Monday. I left the office at 12:30, had my doctor's appointment at 1:30. I was working from home in my PJs by 3:30, and I just worked until I got the work done. So, yeah, it's like if you need to go to your kids' whatever at school, you're not leaving a class to do that. That's definitely nice.
You don't have that feeling of letting down kids or something like that.
Yeah. Or if I want to spend more time with my daughter Lydia, who's adorable, at night, and go home a little bit early. Say if I were originally going to have an afternoon rehearsal, it's not like I would have to go, oh, hey kids, can we reschedule for after 8:00 when my baby girl goes to bed? I'm like, no, I just pull out my computer and I do work. So I'm not, the flexibility of my work dramatically went up because I'm not having to account for 300 kids every time I need to step away. So I think I thought I would be bored. I thought that I was going to be doing something that would be meaningful because I got to go home and be with my family. And that's not what I've experienced at all. I've found that a lot of the things that I found were intellectually stimulating about being a teacher, and that were emotionally satisfying, also transferred here. Just because I was very much into music didn't mean I couldn't also be very much into supply chain or marketing or finance. And I know that sounds like really absurd on its face, but trust me, when you get into it, it's an art too. And the people you get to do it with have feelings too. And so I very much enjoyed it more than I thought I would. But I wouldn't say I work less hard as a business person. I think that was the big thing that really didn't live up to expectations. I'm not going to be doing a 40-hour week anytime soon. So
a lot of those things are like, okay, this is what the next thing will be like and how expectations turned out. What about, obviously when you made that decision, you probably had a heavy heart about leaving the classroom and leaving the kids. How did that end up affecting you compared to what you thought? Because I know, like, leaving a school, I remember, like, transitioning from one school to the other, you imagine that you're going to have this painful hole in your heart forever, and in your situation, your life went from in the classroom to this totally different type of setting with, obviously older people more around you and filling different emotional parts and social parts of you.
You have relationships.
Yeah, you do. And it's just where it was with students, now it's with other adults probably more often. And
yeah.
And so, like, for me, going from one school to another, I recently made a big change. I thought, I'm not going to relate to these middle schoolers the way I related to these high schoolers. And I thought, there's going to be this huge gap in my life. And my students at my last school were wonderful. I look forward to, at the end of this year, after a new teacher has had time to work with them, going back and seeing them at a final concert and praising all their great things and seeing them again. But I found myself immediately filled with a different type of connection with the new set of students. And so how was the expectation, it's kind of a long way to ask, how was the expectation of that, like the spot in your heart for it and what it might be like walking away from the classroom compared to how it turned out when you were on the other side?
I would say my expectations were completely in line. Mm-hmm. I knew when I left that there was always going to be a teaching-sized hole in my heart. There is still a teaching-sized hole in my heart. I miss it. I got an email from a student late last week wanting me to come to their pre-UIL. A kid I just really connected with, and she went through some difficult times, and the orchestra specifically was able to be there for her. And so she still emails me and updates me on, I got into Region, and I'm president of the orchestra now. Because she just loves it, and she wanted me to come to their pre-UIL, and I got that email, and I just felt myself tearing up. I was like, I miss this. I mean something to people around me now. Definitely mean something to my daughter, who I get to spend, different kinds of time with. But I miss that, like, hourly meaning something to lots of people. it's like leaving a relationship. Like you are going to miss it, and to the degree to which you miss it is frequently just how much do I think about it? And the longer the time goes on, the less you think about it. But it's not like you get to the end and you're like, oh, well, teaching wasn't that great. I didn't enjoy teaching the students that much. No, it was great. I loved the students. I'm always going to miss that. I just don't think about it like even maybe once a week now. But I think if you go into teaching because you love it, you're never going to stop loving it. It just sometimes it becomes not the right thing for you and your family.
So I think the perception is often if somebody is leaving the teaching profession because of it's, there's lots of challenges in teaching and different things like that generally I think the perception is often that a teacher is burnt out or disgruntled and they leave the classroom. Was that ultimately your experience?
Not really. I go back to I loved teaching the students. So I wouldn't call myself disgruntled. Burnt out, it wouldn't be perfectly it either because, was I tired? Yes. But that wasn't why I left. I think it just kind of goes into who I am as a person and where I saw myself moving forward and learning more about myself. I know that, going back to what I said before, like what drove me was this intense feeling of responsibility to the kids and to doing what was best for them to the best of my ability. And there are times when the reason why that happens is because of you, or the reason why you don't do the best thing for the kids is because of you. But you can fix that stuff, right? You have control over you. Then there's times when it's because of something else. It could be because of the parents. It could be because of the student themselves. It could be because of administration. It could be because of lack of resources and just doing what you can with the hand that you're dealt. And I think certain people are able to see those situations and let go of it and go, okay, well, this isn't the best thing for the kid, but it's just what I have to accept and then move on. And then there are other people where it's much more difficult to let that go. I definitely found myself in the latter category, especially when it was something where I felt like we should have been able to do it differently. And my perspective was frequently flawed on that. It might have been me, but just my ability to let go of trying to do the right thing for the kid when another situation might have gotten in the way is why I ultimately felt like I had to leave. Is because I never felt like I was going to get to a point where if something was going to happen that wasn't the best thing, I wouldn't take that hard. I didn't want to get to that place, to be completely honest. I felt like that was an important part of my identity was wanting that. I felt like that was part of the reason why my program was successful, was that the kids knew that about me. I have flaws, but I always did everything I could to love them.
And see other people like myself, I find, I don't know what it is, it's some sort of weird, almost like a puzzle to solve for me is, okay, I know because of various factors, parents, admin, resources, whatever, the very best thing for the kid is often not going to be possible.
Yeah.
How can I make it the best possible scenario given the hand that's dealt? And I face it like a cool puzzle to solve, is how can I make this work?
Well,
that's because I'm also able to put that aside, that feeling of like, this isn't best for the kid. I'm able to and not to be cold, but I find I have to find a way to separate myself from it and look at it as how can I solve this issue? And
so I'd agree. That's why you're still teaching and I'm not, because it's that ability to not look at those constraints as things that are going to rub you wrong later. To just solve within those constraints and to be okay with that. for me, I didn't want to accept those constraints, and I had a really hard time letting go of that. In business, same sorts of situations happen. There are always going to be constraints. You know exactly what you'd like to do, and then you know what you can do, and those are frequently not the same thing. I don't feel as much of a moral imperative to rail against those constraints that are external, and then not just the constraints that are external, but internal. We're always striving to be better, and I was not able to accept sometimes my own learning process. There are things that it was going to take me time to learn. Matt knows this better than anybody. When I started working with him, I was wet behind the ears and I didn't know what I was doing. And he mentored me and he was patient with me, much more patient than I was with myself, because I just wanted to be good, and I wanted to be good now because the kids deserved it. And the kids do deserve it, but maybe they don't deserve it 5 seconds from now or 5 minutes from now. Maybe they can wait for you to grow along with them.
I didn't even think. I didn't even think about the fact in that whole process of like, you want what's best for the kids, and maybe what's best for the kids is you in 7 years of teaching from now, but that's not one of the options you can give them, and you probably had to be okay with. You had to learn to be okay with that as you learn.
I would hope that everybody in this room feels like every year they got better, and the kids got a better version of them. And so, to the extent that you're not there yet, are you morally wrong for not being there yet? No. Like, that's your growth process. I think the only situation where it's quote unquote morally wrong, and feel free to disagree with me on this, is when you stop trying. The kids deserve you doing your best. They don't deserve the best you will be in 20 years from now. They deserve you doing your best in your current situation right now, while also taking care of yourself enough to keep doing it 5 years from now, and 10 years from now, and 15 years from now, and 20 years from now. And finding that balance is extremely hard. And I really struggled to find that balance because I loved what I was doing so much. I just threw myself into it, and I bathed in it. I feel a little bit more detachment from what I'm doing right now than that moral imperative. I'm good at what I do now. I'm better than I was yesterday, and I'll be better tomorrow than I was today. And that bothers me less than it did when I was teaching, is the fact that I'm not where I'm going to be 5 days from now. Could also just be that I'm older.
Do you see yourself coming back at any point? Like, is that door still open?
I can see myself teaching again. I almost can't not see myself teaching again. I don't see myself teaching in the public schools again. Or in the private schools, for that matter. I love what I'm doing. I'm blessed in that I found something else that I can really love doing, and with people I've loved doing it with. And that makes all the difference in the world in your happiness. But I am a teacher. And that will never be something that's like dead. I taught private lessons all the way through my MBA. I've taken a step back from that just for like balancing a new job and being a dad. I might eventually go back to that. I look forward to teaching my kid. I look forward to being the world's most awesome orchestra parent, or choir parent, or God forbid, band parent. So if my kid decides they want to play the flute, I will bite my tongue and smile.
Well, we just did a petting zoo event last night or whatever, our school, and everybody's trying out the instruments, and I just had to tell several parents, you could tell the kid, I said, so what have you heard here tonight that if you had this class every day, what sound do you want to hear every day? And they said, and with the biggest, most genuine grin on their face, they said, the bass. And you see this parent with them imagining this superstar violinist, they just look crushed. And I have to turn to the parent and say, it is very important, but essentially, it is very important that you go with the instrument that your kid just said with the biggest grin on their face.
Yes, yeah, I gotta agree.
I saw that same look on your face when you said flute. You're like,
I will do what I gotta do. But no, I look forward to being involved in her education. I look forward to helping out at my kid's school. I met with another director earlier I guess it was my fall semester, so it's not the current semester, it's spring now, but in the fall semester, just saying like, hey, here's all the stuff I learned in Excel that would have saved me hours and hours and hours if I had known this before I went into teaching. I'm still really passionate about that stuff. But I think if I didn't like my job, I would. But I like my job.
what would have to change? What would have to change? You said not public school, not private school. So let's say any of those together. Like, what would need to change in?
So Claire, oh, sorry. Go ahead. I thought you were going somewhere.
No,
before
it's okay.
that.
What would need to change in public school, private school? That because it sounds like a philosophical change would need to happen. What would that philosophical change be for you to be comfortable being back in that setting and being able to do what's best for the kid? What would need to be, across many campuses, many administrators, many types of parents, many socioeconomic backgrounds? What, as a global concept, would need to probably change?
So I'm not sure how useful this is going to be for the listeners, because for me, it would take a very global change in human nature. It would take people giving teachers the benefit of the doubt. Taking into account more often than not, in fact, very, very frequently, the fact that the teacher cares about the kid and that's their primary motivation, and approaching them from that standpoint, one of trust, and actually approaching. I'm sure that many of the listeners and you guys too have found yourselves in a situation where a parent got really upset and never told you. Mm-hmm. And that ended up creating more problems than if they had told you. Mm-hmm. I've been wrong in a situation and not known it because they didn't tell me. And I would have been so embarrassed had I ever known that I had done the thing that they were upset about. But if they had come to me with hey, this is really bothering me, but I trust you enough that we can have this conversation and figure out how to move forward. So it's just things like that kind of that trust that allows you to work through situations in a healthier manner would be huge, because that was the kind of stuff that would stress me out a lot. The other thing I would just say is a kind of an attitude shift in terms of resources. I was blessed and I had a place that we had nice instruments. The kids had nice cellos to play on in class, right? And not all the kids had nice instruments at home, but we could get them something playable from a local vendor. Had lots of people that helped us out that way. What I mean more in terms of resources was the fact that I had 2 teachers with over 350 kids, and the only way that was ever going to change is if kids stopped wanting to be in my classroom. By the way, yes, there is a vacuum cleaner going through this building at the moment. I apologize for the background noise to the listeners. But the only way that it was ever going to change is if I did not as good of a job and fewer students signed up for my program, or something fundamentally shifted demographically. It was never going to change because more students came in, and so they were going to shift around a teacher from another discipline that might have been teaching, even foreign language, or extra math or whatever, they weren't going to give up one of those kinds of people to add an extra orchestra director. And so it meant the more that my kids loved me, the worse of a job I felt like I could do, because I was going to be with more of them. When I left, the year I was looking at, I was going to have 42 kids in a small room. And I didn't think I could do a good job with them. And that terrified me. I hope they solve for that. But
I can very much relate to that feeling. I've been without, naming schools or situations, I've definitely felt that feeling before. It's like, I need to find ways to be, seriously, like, I need to find ways to be less good.
Yes.
For the math problem to work out.
If I get less good, I might be able to be more good because there'll be more of me per student, which is just a really backwards way of thinking about anything ever. So it's like, and at the same time, we're not being star tested. There's no standardized test saying like how well y'all did, other than a contest that we go to that doesn't factor into the school rankings. I get where they come from on that. I don't blame them for that. But it's really difficult if your kids like you, and I was blessed enough that they did, and that made my job harder.
So when I mentioned to another director that we were going to do this episode, I was like, I want to do this episode, and it's going to be kind of dark. We're going to be talking about leaving teaching, and I said, because we need to talk about, the reasons you might leave, the reasons you might not go into teaching, and I would say that we've mentioned many of them at length, and it even feels kind of heavy. We knew we were going to be talking about it. We knew some of the things you were talking about, and I'm kind of like, whew, okay, so, and that I talked to that teacher about it, and they said, man, that's the stuff you just can't think about. Like, to be a good teacher, you just can't think about that stuff. You just got to go in and do the absolute best you can. Like, the only way essentially they were saying, the only way you survive this job is to not think about a whole bunch of the stuff that we just mentioned.
Can we pause and think about how incredibly unhealthy that is? Just for like any situation ever, regardless of teaching or not. And it shouldn't be that way. Mm-hmm. And I feel like you have to have a different answer to that if you're going to be able to stay in it. I tried that. It didn't work for me. So at least I would have needed a different one. You have to think about how you're going to deal with that, because that stuff is not going to stop being there.
So you don't think that just keeping your head down and powering through is the way to deal with that?
No, I think that's burnout.
If you were not Geoff Golden, and you were going to, let's say you had your two paths. You had your people can see that on the show. If you had stuck with it. What would you be recommending to teachers who are feeling the kind of things that you were feeling? What do you think the healthy way, if it's not head down and power through and you just can't pay attention to those negative things, what is potentially, because obviously you chose one path and there's the other path, what potentially would be the answer to that for people who are feeling what you're feeling?
Well, I think what I'd say to somebody in that particular situation is, again, you've got to separate who you are as a human being from how your program is going. For me, I felt that moral imperative, it's got to go well. And if my kids aren't doing well, I'm not a good person because I didn't properly do all the things that I could have done. Because there will always be that thing that you didn't do. Doesn't matter how good you get, there's going to be something at the end of the day and you go, well, shoot, I wish I'd done something differently. And so that eats you up. And at the same time, I do think that education has a tendency to encourage that kind of thinking. Do whatever you need to do for the kids. Do whatever you can do to be better. That's how you become a good person, is kind of the way that it's often looked at. You can't keep going like that. So if your goal is to just ignore that, you better be amazing at ignoring it, or you got to come up with something else. And so first, detach who you are from how your program is going. Tie it more to what kind of effort am I putting in within the constraints of needing to be a good dad or a good husband or wife or, whatever else it is that you do that's really important. I'd say I'd get a mentor. My last year of teaching, one thing that took a lot of my stress off was that our instrumental coordinator talked with me a bunch about different things and talked through different things. Talking with Matt took a lot of that off of me. He remained my mentor long after he stopped being the head to me being the assistant. And it doesn't even necessarily need to be somebody who you feel like, oh my gosh, they're so much better than me. It might just be somebody who's got a different perspective than you, because somebody can give you that reality check and help you see that. So a mentor, learn to let go and to accept what you can do within boundaries. And then whenever you're feeling down, remember why you went into teaching. It wasn't for the administrators. I can't think of anybody who could went in and be like, oh my gosh, I love
authority figures.
Yes.
Love it.
You went into it because of the kids and loving teaching. If you didn't go into that, maybe consider leaving. Seriously, if you don't love teaching, if you don't love teaching and you don't love kids, you got other reasons you're not going to survive. But just find that way to return back to what is the core of what I'm doing and focus on that thing that you love. And focus on teaching even above student situations, focus on teaching above parent situations, focus on teaching above administrative situations. All those things factor into teaching, but focus on how am I going to teach this thing the best way that I can to the students that are coming into my room today. And how can I make that fun for me? And frequently for me, when it was fun for me, it was fun for the students, and we all had a good time. So I wish I had told myself that more when I was teaching. And I still love what I'm doing now. It's not like, oh my gosh, I gave up my life. But
was there anything else you wanted to cover?
I'm still glad I was a teacher. I don't regret going into it, having done it, having worked extremely long hours, having left it, being glad that I left it for who I am and where I'm at right now. I'm still glad I had that experience. And so I just remind everybody that what you do is vitally important to somebody. Be encouraged by that, and then also be encouraged enough to go, I can let myself let go of things, because I'm important, because these kids' education is important, and I'm the one that gives it to them. So I need to take care of me too.
We hope you enjoyed our discussion with Geoff Golden. The educational work featured at the end of this episode is Afternoon Soliloquy by Susan Day. You can find it at luxmusic.com. If you have any questions or suggestions for the show, shoot us an email at rightofstring@gmail.com.
Also, if you haven't already, please subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts and join us for our next episode.
See you next time. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.